I think in all of the talk about this, we have to be very careful about imputing the motives or the actions of a deranged individual to any particular group of Americans who have their own political beliefs. I mean, what we know about this individual, for example, is that he was reading Karl Marx and reading Hitler and burning the American flag. What we know about this individual is that he read Karl Marx, he read Hitler, we know he was burning the American flag. Now, that's not the profile of a typical Tea Party member.
Is it over the line politically these days, given the kind of climate we're in, to be talking about or graphically showing a politician in the crosshairs or talking about taking them out? Was it over the line sort of specifically, since it's now being talked about everywhere, with Sarah Palin's web ads about people that she would like to see targeted for political defeat?
Well, Candy, I think you're responsible by bringing this up, of doing the very thing you're trying to condemn. I mean, you're making and implying a direct connection between Sarah Palin and what happened.
No, I specifically said we need to tie it away from that.
Picking out a particular incident. Well, I think the way to get away from it is for you not to be talking about it.
No, Senator Durbin did bring it up, so that's kind of why I am.
My own view of it.
As to the second question about whether or not we ought to just tone down the rhetoric, look, like I say, we can always all benefit by focusing issues back on the political issues rather than on the person, and I think that's good for statesmanship, it's good for politics, it's good for government. It's not something that's necessarily going to prevent tragedies like this one, which hopefully will be few and far between, but it's nonetheless a noble aspiration and one that I aspire to.
So when we talked earlier with some people involved in law enforcement and on Capitol Hill and protecting congresspeople, who said that there has been, over the past decade, increasing over the past 2 years, increasing numbers of threats against public officials. We have seen an increase in a number of specific categories of violence, sort of nationwide, although not across the board. What accounts for that? If it's not the political rhetoric, what is making things seem so much worse now in terms of the number or the threat level?
I don't know, and I don't think anyone pretends to have the answer to that. As some have pointed to a breakdown in the family structure. Many people who engage in these activities come from families that have broken down in one form or another. I don't know anything about the perpetrator of this particular crime, and so I won't try to speak to that. But there does appear to have been an uptick in acts of violence, and I think that's unfortunate. It's something we need to work to address.
We live in a world of violent images and violent words, but those of us in public life and the journalists who cover us should be thoughtful in response to this and try to bring down the rhetoric, which I'm afraid has become pervasive in our discussion of political issues. The phrase, "don't retreat, reload," putting crosshairs on congressional districts as targets. These sorts of things, I think, invite the kind of toxic rhetoric that can lead unstable people to believe this is an acceptable response. And I think that we all have an obligation, both political parties. And let me salute the senior senator from Arizona, John McCain, whose statement yesterday was clear and unequivocal that we are not accepting this kind of conduct as being anywhere near the mainstream.
Senator Durbin, let me just follow up before I get to Senator Alexander, and that is when you talk about, putting those that you want to defeat in crosshairs sort of graphically, on the internet, you're talking about Sarah Palin here. And I guess that the undertow, and certainly it's not an undertow on the internet, but the undertow with politicians now speaking publicly is, well, the Republicans and the Tea Party and Sarah Palin have gone way too far in their rhetoric. It's been violent rhetoric, and therefore this sort of thing happens. Are you making that direct connection?
I don't think you could ever make that direct connection, but don't we have an obligation, those of us in public life and those who cover us, to say this is beyond the bounds. It may be constitutionally permissible, but it shouldn't be acceptable rhetoric.
We just came out of an election. We saw a candidate for the United States Senate saying if you can't get what you want at the ballot box, let's seek Second Amendment remedies. What does that mean? That is a very vitriolic statement, and I think that somebody is responsible for speaking up denouncing that kind of stuff. When you don't denounce it, people keep ratcheting it up, and people get to a point where you cross the line. And I think that in this instance, this issue has crossed the line. And I believe that those of us who are in responsible positions owe it to the country and owe it to ourselves, owe it to this great institution that we call the United States Congress to speak out against this kind of rhetoric, because if we don't, it will keep ratcheting up, up, and up. And before you know it, as Martin Luther King Jr. has admonished us, that the people of ill will have won the debate.